love that stuff, you know, with the killing. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And my hands are registered as lethal weapons. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies specifically. The filmy film.
Lethal Weapon.
No! Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Man, I really pulled the wrong quote, didn't I?
Yeah, we could just start doing our worst Mel Gibson impressions.
Do we have to be anti-Semitic? Ooh, ow.
I believe at this point, yes. Contractually, yes, if that was going to happen.
How do I feel about Mel Gibson?
You want to get nuts? I guess that's Michael Keaton. Anyway, hi, Shahir.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm good.
I feel like we just saw each other.
We did. We just saw each other. We haven't stopped seeing each other.
And
we
it's a
just
delight.
keep seeing each other.
We're a regular Cliff and Rick at this point.
I don't know what that means.
It's a reference to the movie we're about to review, Cliff and Rick. Rick Dalton and Cliff, his stuntman.
Oh, you mean Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt?
Yeah.
I have a hard time when people are that famous getting out of just referencing them in my mind.
Hey, man, you're Rick fucking Dalton. Make sure everyone knows why. And I'm Cliff.
You're
that
Cliff?
makes me Cliff.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Is that how you think the dynamic would be? I think it's the other way around.
Really? You think you're... Well, Rick's the star, right? Cliff is the supporting role.
Yeah.
I don't know. Interesting. We'll get into that in a minute. We got a lot to talk about. This is one of those movies that we just saw today, so we're going to be flying free and fancy fly. What's that phrase? Flying fancy free? Is that the phrase? I don't know. I don't know. It's late. We're sipping whiskey. And
it felt appropriate.
Felt appropriate in some way. But you can reach us with all your in-movie references at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod or leave us a 5-star iTunes review. You can leave us a list if you want to, but we won't read it.
Please don't.
We've got an email this week from Gareth. You want me to read this out or you want to take this?
You take it, Shahir.
All right. Gareth, who I believe is from Australia and has emailed us before. We love hearing from you, Gareth. It's been a little bit of a while. I know I've been late, but I've been a bit behind on your releases. Gareth, we're not impressed. You asked if anyone had saw Spider-Man twice. My wife and I did, which is funny because I really wanted to see Endgame twice, and I still have not.
Hell yeah, Gareth.
These days, we're finding it hard to see every movie we want to see at least once. Also, just quieting down here.
Yep,
for a
okay,
second
all
here.
right, okay.
I'm going to have to agree with Shahir about Mysterio's motives in the third act of Spider-Man.
Gareth, you had me. We were literally going to go on a buddy cop adventure. And now,
to see Spider-Man again,
you just turned into my Mysterio because I trusted you, Gareth, and you took that trust and you just ran with it.
I'm not going to get into this because I don't want to spoil anyone who hasn't seen Spider-Man Far From Home, but you can go back and listen to our episode if you have seen it, and we have an interesting conversation about whether Mysterio's motives are validated, I guess is that. But he has a question for you, Matt.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Matt because you're probably the only one I can make this reference to. Not true. When watching Spider-Man fight an excessive amount of drones mid-swing, gun blazings, did it remind you a little of Act 3 of the Spider-Man PS4 game when you're literally trying to get anywhere?
Oh, yeah, 100%. When the city goes to shit, spoiler alert for the Spider-Man PS4 game,
now,
which you did play.
I played
know.
all the way through. But I have 100%.
Hold on.
I have 100% on Spider-Man.
Without the DLC. Yeah. But what my statement, Gareth, that was a safe guess that Shahir didn't do it. Shahir has played. Hey, Shahir, how many video games you played this year?
One.
Spider-Man. so you were on the money. It's just Shahir happened to trump you up there. Yes, 100% it does remind me of that. I think that game does a very good job feeling cinematic, but also when the city goes to shit, you cannot swing a damn place without getting shot at no matter what. And there's often many, many people in Sable Tech. I actually thought that the drones felt like Sable Tech.
Yeah, you have to do that whole Sable Tech battle. The thing that always drove me nuts in the Spider-Man PS4 game was the catch the pigeons.
I love that.
You know, like I was just like, these fucking pigeons. Why do I need to catch these things?
That's my jam.
Also, still going from Gareth here. It's a nice email, so I just wanted to keep going with this. Also, P.S. Postscript. Are you guys planning to do doing any of the recent Disney remakes? Aladdin, The Lion King. Saw The Lion King today. I thought it was a great balance of a shot-for-shot faithful remake and some mixing it up a little bit. Nothing really surprised me except for a couple of changed song lyrics, but I really loved it as a cartoon to realistic adaptation. The wildebeest shot that flies over them into the gorge. Oh. I'm guessing that was sort of an orgasmic sound. And my nostalgia loves it even if it makes me...
I think he's going, ugh. I don't know.
No, I think he liked it, but he loved it. So why would he orgasm when he was...
UHH exclamation point is not an orgasm sound.
Gareth, we're going to need some clarification on what sounds you make post-coital.
No, that's inappropriate. That's inappropriate.
You can send us an image, eye diagrams,
you
whatever
are
you got.
Fucking terrible human being.
And continuing on from Gareth, my nostalgia loves it, even if it makes me a mindless consumer in Disney's plans for world domination.
I don't want to do the remakes of the Disney films.
Really?
Nope.
Interesting.
I did Beauty and the Beast with the wonderful Jessica Tucker, who we need to get back on when she's on this coast. So
I haven't seen Aladdin. I haven't seen The Lion King. There's been a couple. Is there any other live action Disney?
Mulan's coming out.
I
know you don't watch the trailers. The trailer for Mulan is very good.
Okay, haven't seen it, but it was shot in New Zealand as well. So kudos
Mulan. Here's a sad state of my affairs. I've never seen the original Mulan.
I don't believe I have.
So
either.
I kind of want to see that one first and then watch because there's very few of those Disney movies that I'll be able to do that with. Like watch the live action one first.
Oh.
I don't know the story other than she pretends to be a soldier and then something happened. Like that's literally the thing. I
don't know how I feel about the remake of. I have seen the original animated Lion King.
Oh and a trillion times.
And obviously loved it.
Aladdin.
I don't know. I've seen like images from the Lion King trailer. I've certainly I was curious to see how they were going to create the lions. Reviews for that film have not been good.
They've been mixed.
Generally not positive in the ones I've read, but the one thing, check it out. The one thing I will say is I've been really curious by Jon Favreau's cooking show, The Chef Show, on Netflix, which I've been very, very 53% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, but an 89 audience score.
There's that discrepancy again. So the reviews I read were not positive.
I agree with all the negative points the negative reviews make. I will say that from a stylistic or conceptual standpoint.
What, but you haven't seen the film though?
No. But like for instance, they do say like because they're making these characters fairly animal accurate, let's say, you can't have moments of subtlety and facial structure and awareness and things like that like you can in a cartoon, and that does hamstring it quite a bit.
I did see Jon Favreau's. I call him Jon
Favreau,
the chef. I did see his adaptation, The Jungle Book, which I thought was excellent. So
same.
So I don't know,
but I saw it on a plane, and I don't trust low oxygen environments when it comes to my emotions.
I saw it in a high oxygen environment with air conditioning, and it was good.
Okay.
Will we do? There was a book, The Big Picture, which I read last year. I can't remember the author's name.
That's Movie Bob's show.
Which outlines how Disney is trying to maintain its IP by adapting its animations into live action. It's called The Big Picture: The Fight for the Future of Movies, and it's by the author Ben Fritz, and it's available right now on Amazon. It's a very good book. It also outlines how Marvel Studios ended up becoming a multi-billion-dollar part of the House of Disney.
Oh, they made great movies. I mean, that's how they did it. I mean, I just saved you some money on a book. You should read the book. It sounds it's interesting, but I will say, I mean, you can make as many high-pitched noises as you want. It doesn't change anything.
That's my Lion King impersonation. Moving on to the 9th film from one director, Quentin Tarantino.
I think when you say that, you have to make the noises of those letters actually smashing onto the screen.
9th film by Quentin Tarantino. They started doing that during Kill Bill. I think that was
know.
Yeah, it was a Kill Bill thing where the amount of films by Quentin Tarantino became a thing. And I think it's become more prevalent because he's kind of, Mr. Tarantino has kind of talked briefly about how he only wants to make 10 films. So this is the penultimate.
I hope his 10th is Star Trek.
Yeah, he's talked about the 10th film might be Star Trek, which he has described in some capacity as being Pulp Fiction in the Star Trek universe. I don't know what that all means other than to say Quentin Tarantino is incredibly formative filmmaker for me. We've talked about this on our Hateful Eight episode, which was many years ago.
Like 2 years ago.
Well, no, more than that.
No.
Yeah, because it was like in the first year we did this podcast. It was 2015, I think.
Jesus, have we been doing this long?
Yeah, we've been doing it for a while.
Fuck, I'm just going to keep drinking.
I recall when I was a younger man in high school, I got a hold of a VHS copy of Reservoir Dogs. It was one of the things that got me excited about writing and alternative structures in storytelling. Having not been exposed to that kind of film up until that point. I snuck into a screening of Pulp Fiction when I was 15 15 years old, I believe, and I was like the only kid at my school that had seen the movie. So
You're bad.
And I had a design teacher, architecture and design teacher, who was really into films, and he hadn't seen it. And so when I had seen it, I got up in front of the class and I was explaining the structure of how Pulp Fiction worked. You know, the fact that Vincent Vega was alive in this scene, and then but he died in the scene before, and the stories were kind of mixed up and muddled up. I was very excited. I was drawing diagrams on the board, that kind of thing. Which is needless to say, suffice to say, Quentin Tarantino is an incredibly important filmmaker in my life. Growing up with him, I didn't enjoy The Hateful Eight as much as I thought it would.
I really liked it.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. You can go back and listen to it.
Go back and listen to it. I don't recall.
I really enjoyed it.
I recall us both being mixed on it. I could be wrong about that. You should go back and listen to that episode.
I do also want to revisit it on Netflix because it's extended and broken up into episodics.
Yeah, it's broken up into, and it's broken up in very unusual ways. For example, where it's basically in the middle of a scene, an episode will change.
And I remember what I didn't like, and I think it was the sort of violence at the end. But I really did enjoy the structure of the film and what it was trying to do. It's just when you sort of start playing incredible violence sometimes for comedy of like real we've talked about this before, but that was the part that I didn't
come up in this film.
What?
So I obviously was not going to watch any trailer, and I was just going to go rock up to the movie theater, and I did today. I paid the premium to go see this movie in 70mm at the Village East Cinema, which is where I went last time to see The Hateful Eight, and was very disappointed because they played it in one of the smallest theaters. But this time I got it in the big full feature presentation. Matt, where did you see this film?
I saw this at the Astoria Kaufman. Let's talk. Let's do a little segment I would like to call Garbage People in the Movie Theater.
Do you mean the people who collect the garbage for you?
No, I mean people that are rude as fuck and I want to just smack in the back of the head consistently.
Ooh.
Shahir,
Wait, am I one of these people?
No, I'm just saying I'm trying to relate to you on an emotional level.
Okay, let's get down.
So I went to go see this film at 9:30 last night.
Okay.
So Thursday
opening night.
Yeah, opening night.
Yeah.
So you'd think that people going to see a Quentin Tarantino movie would know kind of what a Quentin Tarantino movie is. And I feel like I was surrounded on the left, the right, and the back by many different people that were just so fucking rude. So I went with my buddy Anthony. Who, it's funny, he's built like a fucking truck. He's an amazing dude. He's a gentle giant. Yeah. He's 6'7" or something. Like, it's insane, and he's just fucking jacked. And so I was feeling particularly bold when dealing with these people because I'm like, I literally have the fucking Terminator here.
Yeah.
So there was two dudes on my left that were literally just having full volume conversations through the entire thing.
Yeah.
To the point where I literally, Shahir, I didn't say anything to them, but I leaned over onto their armrest, and I like basically touched his arm with my arm, and I put my fist against my chin and did the whole like Willy Wonka like oh really face.
Yeah.
I stared at him for about 2 solid minutes, and he freaked out. And like got up and like didn't say a thing, like he was scared, and then he just moved one chair over. So and then I couldn't hear them as much. But
then you missed out on 2 minutes of movie time.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did.
Was it worth it?
I don't know. The people behind us, which I couldn't see, so I couldn't like accurately yell
I feel
at.
like you're the kind of person who just wants to get up, stop the movie, and say, "All right, people." Everyone shut the fuck up.
Of course. But that never works, so you have to be creative.
Yeah.
The people behind us kept complaining how long the movie was, but verbally. They're like, I can't believe this movie's still going. And I'm like, A, it's a Quentin Tarantino fucking movie, so you should know this by now. B, if you have a time constraint, you piece of shit, look up how long the movie is. And on the, I shit you not, on the in front right of us, were just people that I feel like there was a row of people just texting and lighting up their phones consistently to the point where I threw a haichu at someone's head.
What's a haichu?
If they're a wrapped candy.
Oh, okay.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And they looked really confused, and I just stared back at them, and I was like...
Well, you didn't say, could you please stop texting?
No, because no one fucking listens. I'm so over people, Shahir. Anyway, I had a fucking terrible time while I was trying to enjoy this movie.
Okay, well, I feel your pain. Yeah, I think that would drive me nuts as well, especially for a movie like this. That you kind of
You want to get lulled into a flow state. I feel like with this,
not
film.
just that, but there's a certain level of respect that this film has for the process of going to the movies. To the point that he shot it on film 70mm, and I was like, I need to pay him the respect that he is paying to celluloid
for this love letter to cinema of a specific era. To walk in and be this disrespectful to the movie, it's so funny because you listen to these, I'm not going to call, I guess he is at this point, an older director, Quentin Tarantino, right? He's not
50,
older.
He's only 50-something years old.
Right, but like, for instance, like, we've been talking about, I've shit-talked Steven Spielberg and a couple other people for being like, only see the movie, like that sort of thing, Christopher Nolan, etc.
Dude's only 56 years old. Like, he's
Which is great, but what I'm saying is, I'm saying the old guard that's like, hey, theaters are important. This experience is important. Quentin Tarantino's the only one I think that actually, in his weird, like, rambly way, which maybe I relate to, gets that idea across in a way that I'm like, I see it. To go to this man's film, and just be not only be a dick, but like collectively be dicks in many different ways. I'm just like, motherfuckers, like, go do that shit while you're watching 48 Meters, the sequel down or whatever. Like, don't fucking do this here.
I have a weird thing with people texting if they're in front of me in the movie, because it's really distracting. It's like a bright light, that's like in the middle of the movie. It's distracting.
I've shined my phone at people. I put it over their faces.
But I always wonder, I wonder if just the vernacular of movies, movie going has just changed and I'm out of touch. And then I do that sort of Principal Skinner thing, which is like, no, it's the kids who are wrong.
It's not a matter of the kids who are wrong. It's a thing where you are all paying for an experience, and it's something where what you're paying for is to be able to watch the thing.
Right. And it does say at the beginning of the movie, usually they roll that.
There's instructions. Yeah, so people can fucking suck a D. I can't. I'm so fucking angry.
All right. So let's get away from the anger of the movie-going experience. But again, I got to see this in 70mm. I will say this. Look, there's a hot debate that rages on in the annals of
some anal raging.
Yeah, the anal raging of big budget directing, big budget filmmakers, the likes of which are, Christopher Nolan, Quentin Tarantino, who believe that celluloid is the last bastion of what true cinema is. I think, I've heard a quote from Tarantino saying that I'm not here to shoot digital. That's not why I got into this business. I want to hear the whirring of the film going in. I want to see the optical effects of actually like printing, processing light through silver halide crystals, which is what film is. And I will say this, as a person who came up, and I've shot films on film and I've shot films on digital now, and digital technology is so far advanced now.
I've shot films on films. I've only shot TV on digital. I've never shot a digital film.
Okay,
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I know that's semantic. Yeah.
And I will say this because I saw I saw a 70mm print, which was gorgeous. It was beautiful, shot by Robert Richardson, who is like one of the great cinematographers of our time. I will say I legitimately, I think it has less to do with the process behind the glass, as much as it has to do with the glass itself and the lighting in front of it, and the optical effects that you can get from digital are, in my mind, just as good. I know there are people who disagree and believe, kind of like vinyl, that there is a sort of ephemeral quality to celluloid that is distinct and unique, and that is true, but the thing is, the actual process by which film makes it to a screen at this point is so influenced by digital technology that the celluloid ultimately gets cleaned and, manufactured to a point where it's not much different from digital. Now, Tarantino himself has a different relationship to film and digital because he is one of the curators. I believe he's one of the owners of the New Beverly Cinema.
Yes.
Which only plays films in 35mm. He is a curator. He has he has strong relationships with collectors. He has an immense collection himself.
He's probably been in DuArt.
What's that? Oh, he's in DuArt, which is a video production company that we have both worked for here in New York. So apparently his print of Once Upon a Time in the West is just gorgeous.
Once Upon a Time in the West?
Yeah. The Sergio Leone film?
Oh, I thought you were talking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
misquote. No, I'm sorry.
No,
You're talking about his copy of this other film.
His print of it is apparently one of the most gorgeous prints ever. It was playing while I was in Hollywood recently, but I didn't get to go see it. So he has a unique relationship in that the films he loves and the films that he wants to show you are shot on film, projected on film, and so he wants to ensure that his work lives in the same space as those films. So
And not to mention, as a bit of a meta contextualization for this specific film, he shot on, I think, 3 or 4 different types of film depending on what part they are doing. He shot on 16. I think there was a part that was Super 8, and he shot 35 and then some 70.
Yeah, which is not what you would do if you didn't have the $90 million budget that he had for this film.
Of course, but I love that, like, the bounty law scenes, that the show that Jack Dalton is in, and Leonardo DiCaprio is in this thing, why he's famous, this cowboy western show. He shot on 16 millimeter.
Yeah.
And they shot apparently like the whole intro. They shot the whole thing, all those parts in like 2 days. But like, I was listening to the interview with Tarantino. He's like, yeah, we have enough to like do a couple episodes of Bounty Law.
Yeah, and apparently he's written like 4 or 5 episodes of Bounty Law,
Which is fucking great.
Yeah. And so, for me, I just, I respect the man. I respect the love he has for cinema. I don't think there's any other human being that probably knows about as much about both obscure and mainstream cinema as this person. You can go to listen to the Pure Cinema podcast, which is hosted by Elric Kane, a guy I went to college with.
Step through the portal, go to the place where there's another movie podcast.
He has an interview with Quentin Tarantino where they talk about the references for this film. I would never presume that I could ever talk to Quentin Tarantino about movies because he just simply exists on another playing field in terms of what he knows. But by all means, enough respect and reverence for the man and his process to go and see it on 70 mil. And happy to pay the premium.
Sure.
Yeah.
And here's what I'll say, just sort of finishing that thought about the old guard being very film centric. Tarantino is the only one that I have never been remotely thinking old man yelling at cloud with. Like the way he speaks about film and the way he speaks about not only the technology but the experience is what has resonated with me about being like, I can see this point of view.
Yeah.
When Christopher Nolan does it, or Steven Spielberg does it, or whatever, and a lot of times, which is probably a detriment on the way it's getting to me, it's probably a curated bite that's from a publicist or like whatever, and Tarantino will just go out and like ramble at you in a very earnest, and I'm not even saying ramble in a bad way, like I can tell he cares about this, and I'm very clear on why he cares.
Right.
And it's earnest, and it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's effective. It gets me thinking about it in ways that other directors who rally for this experience do not.
It's someone who has a respect for their craft. Yeah, I think is the way it comes through as well. It's it's a real respect for the history of the medium and where the craft comes from and why it matters.
And not that I don't think I of course believe that Christopher Nolan and Steven Spielberg have a respect for the craft, but the way that they talk about it does not deliver that emotional weight to me.
Okay.
So yay, Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah. No, so I was happy to go see it. Matt, could you read us the IMDb plot synopsis?
I would be absolutely delighted. A faded television actor and his stunt double strive to achieve fame and success in the film industry during the final years of Hollywood's golden age in 1969, Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Yes, this is the period of which, now Tarantino was born in 1963, so he was only 6 years old around this period.
Yeah, but he was watching fucking movies.
He was definitely watching movies around this period. 1969 is also, August of 1969 is famously the point at which the Sharon Tate, I think it was called the Tate Bianca murders on Cielo Drive, perpetrated by the Manson family, happened. And as Joan Didion coined it in her book, The White Album, or in her set of essays, The White Album, the end of the golden era of Hollywood, or the end of the age of innocence of Hollywood around that period. So the film is ostensibly about an aging actor by the name of Rick Dalton, played by one Leonardo DiCaprio, and his traveling stuntman stuntman played by one Bradley Pitt. Bradley Pitt, traveling around and coming to the realization that the way Tarantino describes it is in another podcast that I listened to is the pomade boys. You know, the guys who sort of had this sort of masculine energy. They were kind of, you know, clean cut, well shaved, you know, like strong masculine figures who were realizing that their place in Hollywood was being usurped by the hippie culture, you know, like long hair, disheveled, you know, kind of looks, the you know, like obviously the Easy Rider kind of, the Peter Fonda kind of look, the Peter Fonda, Dennis Hopper kind of thing. And then the film kind of intertwines with a telling of Sharon Tate's day. The film is kind of split up into 2 different days, each 6 months apart. Rick and Cliff's lives. Rick happens to own a house that is next door to Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate, and their lives tend to sort of, I guess, intertwine with Sharon Tate as she travels around her day. Matt, I've just seen this film, and I have some very interesting thoughts as I'm piecing together the experience.
I love how you're calling your own thoughts interesting.
Well, interesting to me. I guess maybe the word I'm looking for is piecemeal thoughts. I'm still constructing. I'm still constructing my opinion of this film.
Well, I'll say, I mean, straight up, this movie is a hard nut to crack. Other than
Let's go
my
with the walnut analogy.
terrible film going experience,
Right.
I have I'm like maybe less than at this point I would have 24 hours ago just been sitting down to watch it. I know that I enjoyed my time watching the film.
Yeah.
I know that beyond enjoy, like I really did, but I will say that this is a specific kind of film that the only way I could classify it after thinking about it today is indulgent cinema.
Ooh, very, very much so.
Yeah, right? Like, it makes total sense. And Zoe, you can hear in the background, my cat agrees with me.
Right.
In every way. The way it hangs on scenes, the way it kind of wanders off like a distracted child or elderly person to another topic for like 10 minutes and then just comes on back. Like, it's a bit all over the place while also being very contained. It is one of the most dichotomous films I have seen in a long time, because every time I'm like, oh, it was too slow and like whatever, I'm like, but it did this because of X, Y, and Z. And every time I'm like, oh, well, like, it's just a compilation of driving scenes with popular songs from the era. I'm like, but they did make me feel like I was in the space. Like, there's a lot of back and forth I'm having with what I think of this film. And, you know, overall, first impressions, first thoughts, I definitely enjoyed my time. I think it was again, other than the yuckles that I was dealing with, a movie that should be in a movie theater that you watch.
Of course. It's Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah. And it's so funny because it's just a perspective thing. It's either like you know, it's either calming or unfocused depending on your perspective. The soundtrack is either eclectic or oppressive depending on your opinion of those things. I will say the look of the film and getting it to look like 1969 Hollywood and the visual trickery that they had to do sort of there, I really appreciate. There are 2 disparate stories in this movie. One is the sort of fictional fake Hollywood actors played by Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio, or the stuntman, and the other one is the actual sort of story of Sharon Tate that gets intermingled, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in spoilers. And they do not entangle truly until the very end. And I can see how that could bother certain people. Because, to be honest, in the middle of this film, most of the interaction you get from Margot Robbie playing Sharon Tate is her watching a movie of the actual Sharon Tate. And those scenes are lovely. Don't get me wrong. It's like an artist enjoying their craft while not like in anonymity to a point, and really breathing in the fact that like they're making people laugh or feel or something. But it definitely doesn't feel like really part of the rest of the story. If that is an important aspect to you, and granted, it's funny. At first, I was like, "Oh man, like Tarantino doesn't normally do this stuff." It's like, yeah, he fucking does, dummy me. Like Pulp Fiction is entirely disparate storylines that, granted, I think are weaved together better, but they are disparate stories. I don't know. It's a hard. I go back to a hard nut to crack. I'm talking like a Brazil nut. Brazil nuts are delicious, but also the hardest to get out of the shell in one piece. And I think this movie is a Brazil nut.
Wow, a Brazil nut of a movie. I'm not sure. Is that on a scale? Is that on a star scale? Where does the Brazil nut land?
I can give you the nut scale.
Okay.
I mean, like,
is it like a cashew?
Well, a peanut's super easy to open.
Right.
Followed probably.
Yeah, but what's your favorite nut to eat? Like.
I thought we were talking about nut to crack would be the analogy.
No, but like once
you literally just want to know my snacking habits?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, like on a scale
almonds,
of nuts,
100%.
Almonds are your and how far? But what's the worst nut?
Oh, the worst nut.
Is it walnut? Walnut has that sort of metallic aftertaste.
I kind of dig the walnut metallic aftertaste. I would say a chestnut is probably my least favorite.
Okay, so
nut.
between chestnut and almond, where does the Brazil nut sit?
Oh, Brazil nut's high. Brazil nut's delicious.
It's closer to the almond.
But if we're going for deliciousness and I'm specifically, I want everyone to know this very clearly. I'm no longer talking about the film. I'm just talking about nuts.
Yeah.
A Brazil nut is so much harder to crack than an almond is.
Yeah.
That the amount of effort you have to put into a Brazil nut versus how much you have to put in for an almond isn't quite enough to make the difference of flavor. So almond all the time, but Brazil nuts, if you can get that if you can get one cracked perfect, and I'm one of those people. Let's just talk about nuts. Where if I crack the Brazil nut in half, and then I have to like pry it out with like one of those like nut pointer things, I get really frustrated, and I don't enjoy the nut as much.
Okay. So many ways this could be taken in the wrong context.
I just wanted to keep saying nut
I know,
to see what you did.
In the wrong context. So I will say this. I certainly, like you, enjoyed the experience of watching this film. I enjoyed the camaraderie between Rick Dalton and his stuntman Cliff. I think Cliff comes out, despite being kind of a problematic character.
He's super problematic.
Comes out as being like one of the coolest on-screen presences.
Yes.
On-screen in memory, and it reminds you of like what Brad Pitt can bring to a role just by simply
being himself.
Yeah, just being himself. He's got this sort of like. And I guess it's strange because basically Leonardo DiCaprio is tasked with playing like nervous and insecure against Cliff, who's like focused, calming, plus a great cheerleader, plus just like a cool guy to hang out with.
I mean, despite his problematic backstory, which we will get into, he's like literally the best friend you want around. He's my Anthony in the theater when I was dealing with this stuff.
Right.
He's your fixer.
Yeah. And so he's got this like, like I just loved seeing how he dealt with scenarios. Particularly, there's a scenario later on in the film involving. I guess semi-spoiler, but involving the Spahn Ranch, which anyone who knows the Manson family story will
their
know
home
what
base
will know what that means. But yes, I completely agree with you, and I think the issue for me is that essentially the film is a love letter to Los Angeles, Hollywood around that period, but it's threading through two different stories. One is the story of the changing face of Hollywood around that period. So Tarantino is very invested in this idea of actors who basically aren't suited to what the 70s are going to bring. And, Rick Dalton in this film is this actor who basically is trying to make that transition from TV to film and is not able to do it, and has to take this sort of in his mind, compromise deal of going to Italy to shoot, spaghetti westerns,
right?
Which in the period of Clint Eastwood was still kind of seen. It's like an NBA player going to Europe to play basketball for a while. You know what I mean? But then threaded through this is and obviously Rick Dalton is a fictionalized character and Cliff is a fictionalized character based in some part, and I think Burt Reynolds was originally going to be cast in some part in this film, and so based on some part of the relationship relationship between Burt Reynolds and his stunt double. You could pour days, weeks, months, endlessly finding every reference in this movie. If you're a person who loves to dive deep into the references that Tarantino will throw at you in a movie, you will be delighted with how much this film throws at you. Every movie poster on the wall, every song that's referenced, almost every other shot feels like it comes from another movie. And Tarantino is one of those people that has the ability to do that while still making the thing that he's making transcendent beyond just being a pastiche of other people's films. It's a rare talent. It's what he's incredible at, and it can never be denied that he makes unique films that draw so heavily on other people's work. And that makes him a pop artist of the highest caliber.
Yeah.
But coming back to the narrative threads of this film, there's this narrative thread about an actor who's like moving out of that space, and it's threaded through this narrative of the Sharon Tate murders, which we all know and understand. And ultimately, I think I have to get into spoilers to really fully explain.
We're about halfway through.
No, but to fully explain what I'm going to say.
Of course.
But
spoilers.
I will say this. I don't think that those two threads kind of came together in a meaningful way for me watching this movie. And I think the issue that I had there was that I was curious as to why Tarantino had chosen the Rick Dalton and Cliff story to ultimately thread through the Sharon Tate murders. And I didn't. This film does something similar to that what we've seen in his work with the Inglourious Bastards, for example, which is doing a kind of revisionist history, which we will spoil a little bit later on. But I didn't understand why why the story of a fading Hollywood actor was necessary to kind of reclaim the Tate murders. And you can explain it with the sort of sense that they're both actors. One is on the rise, one is on the out. There's this sort of sense of innocence lost, yada, yada, yada. But it still doesn't ultimately kind of give you that clarity of vision that I think I needed to walk away understanding essentially what this film was getting at. And that is, this is the first time, I think, in any Tarantino film for me, where I couldn't get a sense of what the film was getting at.
I have a hot take.
Okay, hot take.
And it's going to involve spoilers.
Okay, so we're in spoilers now.
Yeah. This is what I thought after sort of sitting with it for a minute. Because I, too, when I walked out, I was like, I have no idea if this is saying anything. All this is a love letter to a possible alternate future for Hollywood. And so I don't know if getting to the end is not entirely successful in my opinion, but the ending is something that Tarantino has dabbled in revisionist history in the past, Django, Inglourious Bastards, etc.
Yeah.
And this is like the culmination of that. I think what he's trying to say is if these murders didn't happen, if an up-and-coming Hollywood starlet married to a prominent director, being Roman Polanski, which we don't need to get into at this point, was not brutally slain along with other people, if aging actiony tough guy men were able to transition beyond their normalcy and maneuver into the new age of cinema, and perhaps if all that were to happen, then the golden age would have continued longer. Because the end of the film, and I guess I'm just going to go right into the end of the film, because the only part that actually reads that to me is the very, very end.
Right.
Rather than the Manson family going and attacking Sharon Tate in her house, they get distracted by Rick Dalton telling them off in the driveway when they're waiting to go up there, and they attack his house to find Cliff instead. And Cliff and Rick dispatch them in terribly brutal ways.
Yeah.
And then after Rick, after Cliff goes to the hospital, Rick sees Sharon's ex at the gate, and they talk for a bit, and then Sharon invites Rick up, and there's an over the bird's eye shot of them all talking in Sharon's driveway, and they invite him in, and this is sort of Rick's sort of like culmination of like wanting to be accepted by young Hollywood, and Sharon's still okay, and like he came off a successful sort of transcendent performance that he did on a different type of thing. So all of that coming together is sort of, I think it's just a wish of Tarantino, or not even, maybe it's not even a wish, but like it's a, oh my God, could you imagine if this is how it went?
Yeah.
That's what I think it is.
No, I know. That's exactly what it is. But if that is what it is, it's unusual that Rick and Cliff's story takes up so much screen time in the film, because ultimately, like, what this film does is reclaim the Manson murders. You know, like, I remember there's a Charles Manson was famously obsessed with the Beatles' album, the White Album.
Well, he's a failed musician.
Yeah, he's a failed musician who used to work with the producer of the Beach Boys, who lived at Roman Polanski's house originally.
Which is why he even goes there in the first place.
Yeah, you can go back. If you're interested in this whole narrative, there's a book called Helter Skelter by Vincent Bugliosi, which is an excellent retelling. Bugliosi was the prosecutor, I believe, at the time on the Manson family murders, and also You Must Remember This podcast has like a 15-hour deep dive into the Manson family murders and how it affected Hollywood. It's incredible listening. I think, though, ultimately, I thought the most powerful thing that this film did was reclaim the Manson murders to be not what they ended up being.
Yep.
You know, the murder of Sharon Tate, the sort of death, the spiraling out of Roman Polanski and that sort of thing, and ultimately reclaiming that, plus re-inviting the audience to see Sharon Tate as a performer. You know, like, basically the scenes that we get of Sharon Tate are pretty light in terms of what Margot Robbie has to do. She basically, you know, goes to a movie theater in the movie,
dances to the Playboy Mansion,
and then watches her movie The Wrecking Ball, I think it's called,
yep.
With Dean Martin, and we get to see how delightful she was and how much, you know, like that sort of potential that she had as a famous performer, you know, and she was, by all accounts, you know, I remember seeing Tess of D'Urberville, or Tess, the Roman Polanski film, which had her in it.
Yeah,
I believe she was in The Fearless Vampire Killers as well, but someone may be able to correct me on that if I'm wrong.
Correct him. That's what we need.
Yeah, but ultimately, you know, to me, that is the singular most powerful thing that this film does is reclaim that story. But while I thoroughly enjoyed the Rick and Cliff story, and I, you know, like, loved every scene that I saw of them, I could never reconcile those scenes with contributing to the reclamation of the Sharon Tate, the Manson murders. You know, like, it seemed like the threads, it was almost as though there were two threads being weaved here, and one thread was very differently colored or weighted than the other, and they never quite came together. And all the question that I came away with is got nothing to do with Tarantino's ability. It's got nothing to do with, you know, like, whether this is a failed film or not. You know, like, Tarantino is a master filmmaker. He is great at what he does. He's incredible at making scenes pop and feel lively, and you know, like, weaving in dialogue that is incredible. I think he does he almost pulls off his, you know, I think Tarantino, from my reading of interviews with him, he is a fan of David Fincher, and he pulls off his most Fincher-esque sequence in the Spahn Ranch sequences we're talking about. You know, it is the sort of scene that is filled most with a sense of dread, similar to a scene from Zodiac, for example. But I can't reconcile. But basically, the way I thought about it is, I really liked this movie, and I really liked where this movie ended. What I couldn't figure out is why the camera was pointed in this direction instead of another direction.
I have an idea about that, but again, it's just conjecture. Conjecture. I think that originally, when this was, let me rephrase. What this feels like to me is that Tarantino had the idea of doing a reclamation, as you've put it, of the Sharon Tate murders. And in doing so, he was piecing together how that would go about. And he went to the history of the Manson family and realized that their home base was at this old ranch that used to be rented out as a studio for Westerns. And realizing that the old producer was sort of seduced by money and women that Charles Manson gave him, etc.
That story is fascinating.
Yeah, I know.
It's very complicated.
So that whole thing, right? And then he's probably like, oh, well, I can weave in fake characters here very easily because of since the Manson family basically was living in a back lot.
Yeah,
he can then weave in.
But Rick has, other than living next to Sharon Tate, which is a fiction.
Well, then he added that. Then they added that to make them sort of together.
Yeah, but Rick's, you know, like the focus of Rick's narrative has very little to do with the weaving through. I mean, other than the sort of thematic sense that he is an actor who wants to get in with the Tates and Polanskis, it's very his narrative has very little to do with Sharon Tate, even on a thematic level.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know,
And I'm not saying this works well. I'm saying this is what I'm saying. I'm saying that I think Tarantino fell in love with that, and then as he was developing these side characters, fell more in love with the side characters, and he maneuvered what his story would be based around to be that, and then made sure that in the roundabout way it got to the end points that I said.
Yeah, because I don't think there have been many films made about the Manson murders, and I don't think Tarantino's the kind of filmmaker that would make a straight biopic about, you know, like the Manson murders or anything like that. I don't think he's interested in that, and I think he's interested in more of this sort of playful examination of Hollywood in that period. But there's something about Rick's story which is so out of sync with where this film ultimately ends up, that when those two stories kind of collide together, you know, by the time Rick ends up with a flamethrower to one of the Manson girls and then you know, walks over to Sharon Tate's house, you're left wondering why we spent so much time with Rick early on in this film dealing with his own insecurity, which has ostensibly very little to do with reclaiming the Sharon Tate murders.
I wondered that until the very end scene with them all talking.
I know, but even when they, like, I understood what happened when it all came together, but it didn't feel like that was satisfying, like in the way that when at the finale of Inglourious Bastards, when ultimately Hitler gets slaughtered, and I forget the character's name, but played by I believe it was the actress played by Melanie Laurent. I forget what her name is, but ultimately her plan is to kind of reclaim her hair, you know, like reclaim the loss that is taken from her, and ultimately she destroys Hitler and the Third Reich, and that, you know, that reclamation of history kind of all makes sense, especially with the Nazi hunters and, you know, like Tarantino, Brad Pitt's character in that. It all kind of makes sense in that world. It also makes sense in the Django Unchained world, where Django basically gets to destroy Candyland, you know, through fire. You know, like fire is the repeated motif in all these films, like the reclamation of history is through fire. And in you know, beautifully in Inglourious Basterds, which I think is the most successful of this revisionist history kind of trilogy, the reclamation of history is done through celluloid. You know, it's done through the burning of celluloid. And I think to me, this is the first experience I've had of a Tarantino film where even if I didn't like it as much, like, for example, The Hateful Eight, which I had problems with, it's also the first time where I felt I was out of sync with the movie. I couldn't reconcile the things that he was doing, even though he's doing them very well. You know, like, it's Tarantino.
So the interesting thing is these moments, these revisionist history moments, in Inglourious Bastards and in Django, they all the revisionist history happens and then the story ends. It feels complete. It feels like here's the revisionist history.
That happens here though as well.
And I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Here, more so in my opinion than either of those two films. Not that I want to see this continue, because it's a long movie and I enjoyed the time, but it wrapped up where it should wrap up. It gives me the feeling that because this is sort of like a love letter or sort of a wish or a what if you know, Hollywood sort of continued that way, both if the Tates, if Sharon Tate lived, and also if old actors were able to sort of transition and still be sort of a beloved part of the machine. This feels like a jumping off point of an alternate reality. And the others don't. The others feel like the story's over. This feels like, oh, there's more to this, or not that there's more to this specific story, but now we're like, you're left with that, oh my gosh, even more than like, what if Hitler was killed with fire in a cinema? Like, here, I'm left with more. It expands a universe that does not exist.
Yeah, and I guess you could make the argument that if you were looking at this story, the Tate murder, or the alternative history to the Tate murder, could be the beginning of the film. You know, like it could be the point at which the beginning of the film is, and then it becomes about Rick and Sharon, you know, Rick entering Sharon's life and then, you know, seeing with an alternate, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But there's something about, and like, I also, like, I was very struck by the structure of this film, which is, you know, it's essentially two halves, each 6 months apart, but both one individual day. And I was just left struggling with what was so important about this first day. You know, so we see basically Rick ultimately kind of failing, then succeeding at you know, on his day on what was the call? The
Lancer.
Yeah, the Lancer TV
Which is
show.
a real show.
Yeah, with Timothy Oliphant playing the Lancer character. And you know, I think DiCaprio is wonderful in this sequence. He's so good at playing both the insecure actor and also, you know, demonstrating his ability to like channel almost Cliff's performance into it. And I thought he was just incredible in this thing. And, you know, that scene where he basically fails and goes back to his trailer and he basically gives himself an ultimatum in the mirror that he's going to, you know, put a bullet in his head, and you believe him absolutely 100%. But I was just curious, like, what was it about that particular day that we needed to see that led, you know, like other than basically saying, okay, so from this point, Rick went off to Italy and then came back, and Sharon got pregnant. Sharon was pregnant at this time.
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
It was Julia Butters.
Julia Butters is so good.
Holy fuck.
Yeah.
The scene where they're sitting and reading and talking and chatting, and even the end when, like, that's the best acting I've ever seen. Yeah. So fucking good. That's not the reason, but I'm glad
you know,
that exists.
but DiCaprio in that scene, you know, like he's,
well, you know what?
He's entirely, yeah, no, and it is playing into this idea, you know, like there's a line that DiCaprio has in that, which is that, you know, like she says something along the lines, cheer up, it'll get better. And he, you know, like you're doing, I can understand why you're reading this book. You know, they're talking about the Bucking Broncos book, and he says in 15 years you'll be living it. You know, which I just thought was like a real telling sign of like this sort of insecurity that he has about his career. It sort of makes thematic sense, but it doesn't make narrative sense. You know,
well, I mean, here's the truth of it. I mean, it makes enough narrative sense. It does get you through the points that you would get to the end of the story. Like, it does do that. It just does it in an incredibly extended out way. And again, I go back to the term indulgent.
Yeah.
This film is indulgent in every possible way, through its music or its set pieces or its scenes. There's a one-shot scene where Brad Pitt fights Mike Moe as Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
And it's literally a throwaway thing about the history of Cliff that has nothing to do with anything, that goes on for about 15 minutes as a flashback. You know, and you're like, and I get that it sort of ties in too, because Bruce Lee did train Sharon Tate for that Wrecking Ball movie.
Yeah.
But like, I think that's something where Tarantino's like, oh my God, I can't believe Bruce Lee trained Sharon Tate. We could link all this together. Let's do a side thing with Bruce Lee. That's what I mean by indulgent. And I think I'm going to even go a step further. I think this film, in its indulgence, is making a commentary on the golden age of cinema. Because the golden age of cinema in itself is indulgent.
Yeah.
And therefore, the statement that is being made with this film is going... it's funny. It goes off the rails a lot.
Yeah.
But that's I think the feeling of the time of just like, everything's cool. Is this interesting? Let's hang out here for a second.
Yeah.
And then coming back. Now, narratively, going back just real quick, and I'll wrap up that. 100% you could have a much tighter narrative with probably a more emotional ending and throughput for an average viewer. I mean, movies do it all the time better than this movie did. But I don't think that's what this movie's about. I think this movie's about, honestly, weirdly, enjoying the ride and giving a love letter to a timeline that never could be.
Yeah, and I, you know, again, I guess the other thing was, you know, the film is filled with a sense of dread about Sharon Tate, because if you know anything about the Manson murders, you know exactly where it's going. And like, so I knew as I was watching it that, you know, like this first day that we were seeing was not the day of the murder, because she wasn't pregnant, which is this fact that I have maintained in my head ever since I read Helter Skelter back in the day. Oh, this is where we're going to come to with Helter Skelter, by the way. Manson was famously obsessed with the Beatles' The White Album, which had Helter Skelter on it.
Yep.
And U2, when they did their album Rattle and Hum, I think it was Rattle and Hum, they did a reimagination of Helter Skelter, a live reimagination of Helter Skelter, and they said at the very beginning of that performance is that Marilyn Manson stole this song from the Beatles and turned it into something.
Charles Manson.
Charles Manson, not Marilyn Manson. Charles Manson stole this song from the Beatles. We're stealing it back. And I think that's kind of the act that this film is doing, which is that Sharon Tate was stolen from us. We're stealing, Tarantino's giving her back to us. And I love that idea, but I can't help but wondering, like,
you're going all Carrie Bradshaw on me right now.
yeah, I can't help but wondering why Rick is so important to the story, because Rick becomes the hero of this film.
Rick represents old Hollywood.
He does, and he represents old Hollywood in a way that doesn't connect with Sharon Tate's murder.
But it does connect with the loss that old Hollywood ultimately felt once this happened. This is seen as a fulcrum point. This is seen as a change.
Here's a thing that I thought would have been interesting, because we're doing so much fictionalization in this film. For example, there's an almost silent moment that happens where Sharon Tate picks up a hitchhiker and takes her to her job. And I was like, I wonder what this film would be like. You know what I mean? If it was literally about the hitchhiker and Sharon Tate.
Well, the thing is, there's lots of moments like that where there's tons of things that all the characters get into in this film that you just have a sense of dread, like, oh fuck, this is gonna go wrong, this is gonna spin, because you do know the story, like you know that one of the aspects of this story. And I think that the continual playing against that is a really good, because you still feel the stress of it.
The thing was, by the time we get to the end and we realize that you have to. As you're watching this, your brain is trying to weave together these two stories. Like, how is Cliff and Rick going to interact with the Manson murders? And we know that he's interacted them with Spine Rush before. But when it happened, I was like, oh, we're doing the Inglourious Bastards thing again. And I was actually put off by that. I was kind of taken aback in terms of like, oh yeah, it's that thing that he did in the previous movie, and yet in this one it feels entirely just the phrase I kept thinking about in my head was the camera was pointed in the wrong direction.
Here's what I'd say.
Or pointed in a direction I couldn't quite reconcile.
I think the revisionist history in Inglourious Bastards is played better and more thematically correct with the film it's in. I think this does suffer a bit from the Hateful Eight syndrome of just turning violence into what you're trying to make uncomfortably funny.
Yeah, it's a weird. There's a weird tension in this, in the violence in this at the end of this film.
So when the Manson family people come and try to murder people, they're met with Cliff and the Italian wife, and the dog,
Brandy, I believe.
Yeah,
it's funny. I know the dog's name, but not the wife's name.
Just destroy them in a incredibly easy and brutal fashion.
I don't know if easy is the word, but there's an.
It's pretty easy, and the only time that Cliff ever gets hurt is by accident when a person falls and shoots a gun. Like it
stabs him.
Yeah. No. There's the stab in the leg, and then he gets shot when he falls down.
Did he get shot?
Yeah.
I don't think he got shot. Write us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com.
Sure.
I don't believe.
But either way, they get dispatched very easy, and that's part of the power fantasy of taking this horrible act back. But and then the woman who literally gets mauled by a dog comes out, falls in the pool. Rick freaks out, and then he comes back with his old flamethrower from his old Nazi killing movie and just roasts her.
And you get that there's an uncomfortable thing that happened in my theater when that happens, which people start cheering. And I get it, I understand, because the Mansons are kind of like Hitlers in this case, which is there is a level at which society is accepting of their
of damaging them.
Of damaging them. Like, it's understandable, but it's coupled with the story that Cliff has of killing his wife because she kind of argued with him, and
That's weird.
Yeah, it is a very, and it's the same level of uncomfortableness that I had at the end of The Hateful Eight, where you're just like, because Tarantino's really good at female characters. Tarantino's really good at writing women. Tarantino's really good at like playing all that. But these last two films have made me question that a little bit.
And there's also, like, for instance, I didn't have a problem particularly with the way that the man was dispatched in this film or the woman who eventually gets fried.
Yeah.
I had a problem with the way that the other woman was
One who's
dispatched,
bashed in the face.
who was literally her skull was crushed in due to multiple blows across multiple hard surfaces, and to the point where it kept happening long after she was dead.
So
and
here's the thing about. Oh, sorry.
that was the part where I was like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
It's an interesting thing that we get into this conversation about violence in cinema, which is that for example, there's a moment before this where the Manson family are kind of discussing how they're going to do the murder, and one of them says, I think it's the one of the younger girls says something along the lines of, "I've got this idea. Let's kill the people. Let's murder the people that
taught us to murder.
That taught us to murder," and kind of
through the medium.
Yeah, through the medium. So there's this interesting sort of, I guess, somewhat level of commentary to it, but then you get this kind of indulgence with the violence, and it is this catharsis of violence that happens at the end of the film, which, in the case of Hitler being burnt alive, we're kind of invited in on the fantasy of it all, and I don't know if the fantasy of killing the Manson family, it feels like that should be okay, but there's something about seeing it.
Well, it goes too far, because there's a point, like, okay, this is how I'll sort of break down.
But then why are we okay with the guy being brutally mauled?
Because here's the deal. The guy was brutally mauled and murdered, but was still fighting back throughout it until he was dead.
There is something visceral about seeing a man beat up a woman that is difficult to watch.
And also,
even if the woman is,
I know, but
like,
there's also
historically the perpetrator of one of the worst murders in Hollywood history.
This is what I'm saying. If you are fighting against a man or a woman, I'm just saying, like, in a cinematic situation, if characters are fighting to the death, when a character is dead or beaten, when the good guy quotes, beats that person, it's done. They might be dead. There might have been brutal violence to get there, but it's dead. Even for the most part, I'll even go back to Deadpool, which I think was still excessive, but for different reasons. When Deadpool kills someone, then they're dead. Here, when Cliff kills that one woman, he goes beyond killing her. He goes to a brutalizing her corpse place. And that is something that, at least for me, and everyone has their own thresholds to violence, but that's something where I was like, from a filmmaking perspective, why? You could have had, I shit you not, you could have had one headshot to that fireplace mantle and called it done, and been like, that would have been brutal, it would have been effective, and a murderer would have died. And then, but instead, we get this beyond that, not even rage because he's drugged.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's like a calm, like, what's the word? It's not even murder or killing. What's the word when you destroy something entirely after it's desecrated, of a corpse.
Yeah.
And that's what got me.
It's weird though, because I guess the film kind of gives us this uneasy tension between, like, could we have exactly that scene with Hitler, for example? Like, are we invited to indulge upon the reclamation of someone who has done harm to others?
For me, death is the end of that reclamation. For characters in films or cinema or whatever, like, I don't think I would enjoy or get any catharsis out of watching Hitler's corpse be brutally just fucking ripped apart. Like, after he's dead and, like, that suffering for him that I wish upon him is done, like, because then once this is just my own personal thing, but once a person is dead, and if you keep doing terrible shit to that person's corpse, that is entirely your darkness coming out and not having anything to do with the vengeance that you have taken upon that person.
You know what I'm imagining when you say that is that scene in Office Space where they're beating up the photocopier and they drag him away and then he comes back and he keeps going with the photocopy.
I mean, yeah.
I think this is inviting a sort of interesting conversation of how that works. But okay, so I agree with the things that you say, and it invites this sort of uncomfortable tension that happens. And people in my audience were cheering when the flamethrower came out and what have you. But ultimately, what it kind of comes down to for me, more so than that, is a lack of cleanliness of the narrative. Now, I think films can be indulgent. I think films can wander. I think films can go down different routes. The way Tarantino in one interview described this is like Alfonso Cuarón had Roma. This is his love letter to LA. But obviously, those two things don't line up in the same way. Because the sort of narrative threading that the sort of narrative threading that Tarantino is doing in this film to connect these two stories feels like he's pulling two curtains that are from different windows. You know what I mean? If you're threading two windows together, two curtains together or something like that. And it's the first experience I've had in a long time, or like any time with Tarantino, where I just didn't quite see it. You know what I mean? I didn't quite see it on first viewing. And I'm always willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm always willing to give him a second shot. I'm always willing to go back to his work, no matter what. But this is the first time where the first viewing was one where I didn't quite feel it.
Here's where there's an interesting
thing. Other than
thing.
maybe Grindhouse.
Yeah.
Other than his the drive.
Here's an interesting thing. I just barely felt it.
Right.
So, I think our opinions of how this movie worked, or if it did or it didn't work, are probably very close if this was on a line graph.
Yeah.
But that middle point, we're just both almost to the end of it. That's what it sounds like. We're both almost to that middle point of where it actually works or doesn't work. You're a little bit behind it. I'm a little bit in front of it, or vice versa. Which means, if this was a percentage scale, we're 5% off.
Yeah, something like that. I was delighted with the way, I never was bored during this film.
Course.
I never felt like scenes were going on too long. I enjoy, when Rick was performing in the I could just, if that was the movie, I could just watch that movie.
Yeah.
When Sharon was going to the movies, I could just watch that movie. The thing I enjoyed the most was Cliff going to Spahn Ranch. I think that is, that's an excellent scene, and the dread in that scene, opening, going to find George who owns the ranch at the back, and then realizing he's alive and what have you.
And everything they've said is true.
Everything they've said is true, but then coming back and seeing his tire, it's all great stuff, and I love it. But whether it all kind of comes together is a question mark I have about this film, and not one that I felt satisfying enough to kind of rave about this movie or anything like that.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite there, and I was never in sync with where this movie was trying to connect with me.
This is what I'd say, though. I would say if you like Tarantino, this is a good litmus test of exactly
how much you like Tarantino.
So go see it, and make sure you have enough time in your day so you're not complaining behind other people in the cinema about how long the film is. It's a long film, but I think because of its sort of listlessness and it's just sort of getting through its stuff, I think that's the correct timing of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm glad I saw it.
Yeah.
I'm glad we talked about it. I'm so interested in hearing what you all think. onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com. Please let us know, because this is a film that, while I feel like Shahir, it just barely didn't get you, and for me, it just barely got me, I'm really interested to hear how it affected other people.
Yeah. I mean, for example, one thing in this film where I was like, I don't know why this is in the movie or needs to be in the movie, is Al Pacino's scenes. You know what I mean? I was like, what, how does this kind of...
It doesn't.
It's
he got Al Pacino.
Yeah, but even Al Pacino's story of I watched your films on film, and we see the film being loaded.
It's a nice setup for who Rick is.
Yeah.
But you don't need Pacino for that. It's just Pacino was there.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm very curious how this movie plays. It's getting very good reviews. People are kind of connecting with it. I'm not one of those people, and it's weird because I'm a fan of Tarantino, but I guess maybe it's a good sign that I can be critical of people whom I deeply admire.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been the only podcast about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Shahir, when you are not questioning your loyalty to one of your favorite directors, where can folks find you?
You can find me backstabbing anybody and everybody on my website at www.shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD. Matt, when you are 5% over the line of acceptance, of the threshold of acceptance, where can people find you?
You can find me with loving and open arms, man. Come on down to my website at mattthewkrol.com for my life and works. Also, Skeletor, the number 4, PREZ on Instagram or PSN, and Emperor, MSK on Twitter. Also, check out my more of my voice if you haven't gotten enough of it on Extra Credits. We're doing some fun stuff over there, teaching you how to play Magic. We're almost through our Joan of Arc series, which has been really, really amazing. Please go check that out. Next week, who knows what's coming up? We don't know. You don't know. No one knows.
Maybe we should just do an entire retrospect. For the rest of the year, we're just going to do every film reference from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That's all we'll do. Let's.
That would take us out to the end of the year. That'll take us to episode 300, surely.
Surely.
But don't call me Shirley.
Don't call me Shirley. Don't call me late for dinner. You're Rick fucking Dalton. I don't know. Anyway,
it's late.
Thank you so much for listening. Again, onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or onlymoviepod on Twitter. Let us know what you thought of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
And we'll see you in New York.
What? I mean, if we run into you on the street.
Should we do a meetup? I feel like we're getting close to doing a meetup.
I mean, we could do a meetup, but then again, like, most of our listeners are not in New York.
I don't know. We'll just go to a bar by ourselves and pretend we know people.
Hey, everyone that doesn't. Yeah, let's do that.
Bye.
Bye.